Damn it, goodness. Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNeese. This is my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatwright.
Hello, beautiful people. How are we doing today?
Hopefully everybody's got good energy like we got going. Feel like we do.
Yeah. Getting back into the swing of things, after Texas and all that, kind of just getting back into the daily grind, and, it's going good so far. I know you've had some exciting things going on.
Yeah, we have. So first off, let's say, guys, we apologize that we didn't get to drop an episode last week. We once again had some technical difficulties. We recorded the full episode. Chase went to edit it, and it was scrambled beyond repair, and we just honestly did not have time. We try to do our recording usually on Saturday or Sundays, and I believe we did it on Sunday last week.
I think so.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Whatever day it was, there wasn't time for us to re-record. So we just had to push it till this week. So we try to stay on schedule as best we can, but sometimes the technical difficulties get the best of us.
Yeah.
So
yeah, especially for me, who's not great at editing. I just kind of do what little bit I can, and if there's major problems beyond that, it's kind of out of my wheelhouse. So sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, I think it's probably just we're both in very rural areas, and Wi-Fi can be a little sketchy and stuff. So or internet, so we're trying to make the best of it. But anyway, so what we recorded last week, we had kind of a template laid out with some. Chase, you got us some. You did a questionnaire or asked for some pet peeves.
Yep.
So why don't you lead us off into that?
All right. Well, first of all, something we didn't do last time that I was going to kind of throw you a curveball. Do you have any knife pet peeves off the top of your head?
Oh, any of my own? Oh yeah, there's lots of them probably, but I mean, it just kind of depends on. I mean, it's whether you're talking about like, and there's different kinds of pet peeves. So in other words, like there's design pet peeves that I have. There's handling pet peeves that I have. There's working on them / maintenance type pet peeves that I have, like dumb stuff that people do that I consider dumb. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, that could be a whole episode in and of itself, just going on my pet peeves. So
True.
I'll throw one out real quick that I know wasn't one of the ones that was mentioned last time. And again, guys, this is a personal preference. It's not right or wrong, because I'm sure there's some stuff I do on my designs that other makers probably consider to be a pet peeve or to be wrong or whatever. But one thing, and I won't say that it's not impossible that I would never do it, but I try my best not to do it if I can help it. And I really hate to see the detent track on the blade show when the knife is open.
Yeah.
So like knife's open, you can see the detent track peeking out from under the handle. It's not actually a big deal. There's technically nothing wrong with it. It doesn't hurt a thing in the world. Like there's nothing about it. It's just an aesthetics thing. I don't know why. I've always tried really, really hard. I feel like it used to be less accepted than it is now.
Yeah, definitely. I think certain major manufacturers have kind of made it, or major manufacturer in particular has kind of made it more accepted nowadays. But yeah, that's one I definitely agree with.
I mean, I've scrapped multiple knives back in the custom days that for that very reason, because the detent track was showing. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that. There probably was a few that they was showing some that I just bit the bullet, and even though I didn't like it, I probably went ahead and put them out there because it was basically that or completely scrap the knife. And again, it's not a functional thing. There's nothing. It doesn't hurt a thing in the world.
Yeah,
it's just strictly aesthetic. But yeah, that's always. I think that was one of the things I picked up when I started knife making. That somewhere along the way, somebody I think pointed out that was wrong or whatever, and that was just a design philosophy that stuck with me, and I just it's still to this day it just bothers me.
Yeah.
So
for knives I make, it bothers me, but for some reason for knives I own, it doesn't really bother me. Like I just got this yesterday.
Yeah.
This is a Guardian Tactical Helix. They don't make them anymore. They just make out the fronts now, but you can see a little bit of the detent track. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but I don't know where the camera is. But
I can tell by the way the handle angles back at the lower half of it that it's going to show.
Yeah. So
and that's the thing. To be honest, like I really like the aesthetics of the way the front of that handle looks.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, sometimes everything is a trade off. So
Yeah.
if it came to where I had a handle design that I just really loved and I liked the way it looked, everything else about it, the profile of it,
Yeah.
and the sacrifice was having let the detent track show, then so be it. It's not like I said, it's not wrong. It's not anything functional that it affects at all.
Yeah.
And you could even argue that it's actually easier to put a little drop of oil on the detent track when it is exposed.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, these are pet peeves, not rights and wrongs.
Yeah.
So what
Like
about you? I know
one
you
for
got one.
me,
Which one you want to pick?
this is one that kind of applies for both buying knives and for, designing. But in the closed position, if like
Yep.
the back of the blade is exposed like that, except on slip joints, is one thing that always kind of bothers me. I want that to be kind of flush with the handle for the most part, or pretty close to
Yep.
flush. I don't want it, sticking too far forward. Where's the camera? Sticking too far forward,
Yep.
or like, being weighed down
Right.
in the handle also bothers me, like where it's like, sort of offset. That's
Right.
one of the things that really bothers me, like as far as design wise. And that's for
Yeah.
both,
It's just
you
one of
know,
those.
my designs and other people's designs.
Right. Yeah.
So
To me, that helps give it the. I mean, there's different design features appeal to different people. I mean, same thing with architecture and stuff. There's lots of different. That's why
yeah.
everybody's house and all the buildings in the world don't look the same. But yeah, I'm with you. It gives it a clean, more classy, clean look when it's like that. You see it. I don't mind it as bad. It still bugs me a little bit. I don't mind it as bad if it's done on a front flipper because it's done intentionally, so
Yeah, I
that you
mean
can
if it's
access the
yeah.
flipper tab out of it. I still don't visually like it,
Yeah.
but um, but I can accept it more. But yeah, it kind of feels like in most cases that there's some slight tweaks that you could have made to the design and gotten it to line up the way you wanted to. It's difficult,
Yeah, I
but
mean I've had to
it's
like basically rework an entire design to get that to marry the way I wanted it to. Like I've had to sacrifice,
right.
some things about it to get that to do that. And I know it can be done, and that's why it kind of bothers me, like when it's not done. Again, not
Yeah,
wrong. Knife still functions. It's just one of those design rules I gave myself, and that's kind of what
right.
defines everybody as far as designers and stuff. Is like we give ourselves a set of rules based on our preferences and go from there.
Yep,
So,
right.
but yeah,
Yep, I would agree with that. That's it's just like I said with the other. There's it's a trade off. There's always trade offs and sacrifices. Like I said, the exact you take a blade by itself and a handle by itself, and you have the profiles that look exactly the way you want them to, and then you marry them up, and you can't you can't maintain that exact same profile and make everything line up in the closed position and stuff the way you want it to. Well, then it's either you change your original idea of the profile of the whole knife, or you tweak stuff to make stuff line up closed, and I feel like that's one thing that a lot of good designers do, and a lot of people that aren't necessarily, and again, this is all subjective, but what I
yeah,
would consider, you know, more not as well designed stuff that's just a functional knife and it looks pretty good open. But when you see a knife that looks good open and closed and just is appealing, I think that shows a lot of thought process. I think the closed position a lot of times is an afterthought, and it's just kind of stuff lands where it lands, and everybody focuses on, not everybody, but the people that don't put as much thought into their design seem to focus more on the open position and kind of forget about the closed position. But
yeah.
I know I used to focus on it less. I always focus on it some, but I've gotten probably as obsessive over the closed position as I have the open position now.
Yeah, and I kind of got to see that whole. It seems like you really ramped up on that about the time you were designing the Mac 2 and stuff like that. Like you were focusing a lot more
Yeah,
on the closed position about that time
yeah,
versus like I think previous designs.
yeah, for sure. Even with the Dixon
Hmm.
that we're coming out with right now, like looking back at the closed positions on some of the customs that I made, like there's stuff that just absolutely that doesn't line up the way I want it to now,
Yeah,
and it drives me crazy. So that was the main evolution that happened with it coming into production was changing up some of the closed position stuff. Yeah, it's one of those things as you grow as a designer or whatever, you kind of find your groove and figure out. And that was when we stepped into production stuff. That was kind of like a turning point for me where I really was like, okay, I really want to focus on, because I wasn't just making a knife and like we've talked about before, when you're doing custom handmade stuff, you kind of can just make changes and tweaks on the fly and stuff.
Yeah.
You get something you kind of like, and the next batch of them you make, you tweak something and make a little more.
Yeah.
When you start working on production stuff, planning on making them, in bigger volume, it
Yeah.
makes a lot more sense to try to get the design nailed the first time. Now that being said, designs have evolved, but I tried to I
Yeah.
put more thought into it for sure
Yeah.
than I used to with my custom for sure. So,
Definitely. And
but
I
yeah,
didn't mean to do that, but that was actually one of the kind of pet peeves. I'd kind of forgot about it since it'd been a minute, but have a nice day knives. My Australian knife designer friend said folders that don't look as clean and considered closed as they do when opened. So yeah, we kind of just hit one
right,
there
yeah,
on accident. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, in agreement with him. Yep.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right. Well, let's jump on into some more of the customer ones then.
All right. From 06472, we have countless soulless Chinese OEM knives that all look and feel the same. And yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a pet peeve of mine, but there are definitely a whole lot of them out there that all kind of have the same look and vibe and feel and materials. And it's kind of a deluge of same. And even, you have the different designers and stuff, but they all kind of end up looking similar because they're being made by the same people. So
Well, and I would add to that part of that is that not everybody, because there are some really good designers that are having their knives made by Chinese OEM shops.
yeah.
So this not necessarily apply to everybody, but a lot of the designers, and I say designer, I'm using that term a little bit loosely in some of these cases, they're laying out a basic, napkin drawing or something of a knife, and
Yeah.
then these OEM shops are having to basically turn it into a working knife. And just like we just said in our opening segment there, you have to make changes, you have to make sacrifices, you have to tweak stuff to make it actually work, and then make it look right in the closed position and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So,
And if they already kind of have
then
a
yeah,
center pivot
a template.
geometry, sort of formula that works, they're going to base stuff around that and
Right.
kind of go from there,
That's right.
you know. So,
That's right. So that completely makes sense that so many of them are looking like that. But the that and the fact that I think you mentioned this last week in the Lost episode, but you mentioned about how basically they just seem to be kind of throwing a bunch of designs, throwing things
yeah.
at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like they're definitely going the shotgun method of just trying to, put a bunch of stuff out there and just see what. And when you have manufacturing costs as low as they have, you can do that. You can just manufacture a bunch of stuff, put it out there, see what people like, and
Yeah.
then go with those or whatever. So,
Yeah. And
which
that's less on the
I
OEM side, more like on the, their own brands. They literally, you know, throw out
right,
10 to 12 designs per quarter. And, some might not even be here by the end of the year. But they may
yep,
just do that one batch and then one and done, gone. Some may be here in 5 years. We don't know because they're literally
yep,
doing the shotgun effect. So, you
yep.
know,
And on the kind of tying into what we were just saying about the quote unquote designers too. It's there's yeah there so there's a lot more. The barrier to entry has gotten so low
yeah.
to be a to have a knife brand
Hmm.
that it's become so watered down. Like because the barrier there used to be a lot heavier barrier to entry to doing this. Like you had to actually you know there was a few places where you could just go with a design and have stuff manufactured, but not that many.
Yeah.
I mean, I know really, really good designers that basically just worked with custom makers to make their designs and stuff because short of getting a collaboration with a big company, it was very difficult to find somebody to just make your line of knives or whatever.
Yeah.
So
It wasn't as
certainly
public.
certainly somebody was going to like take a napkin drawing and turn it into a working knife for you.
Yeah.
So now as long as you've got the cash you know to fund the first run or whatever, and half of them try to do pre-sales and stuff to cover that. So like I mean, anyway, point is it's gotten the market very watered down
Yeah.
for that specific category of knives.
Yeah.
I think if people look past the initial, you know, look into them and see that there actually is stuff out there that looks different than the others. And that brings me to the other part of that comment or pet peeve that I want to address, which is the soulless part. So we talked pretty in depth about this last on the one we lost, but
Yeah.
I do want to touch on it and say, so I feel like there is definitely something almost just kind of something you can't put your finger on when you pick up something that is made either by an individual or by, in this case, small shops. It's something that's not made in mass production, is that you can just tell a difference.
Mm.
Like it really is. And it has that feel, it has that vibe to it. And to add to that, if you follow people, and there's other companies that are doing a good job of doing the same thing, but like if you follow us, then not only are you getting that vibe from the end product, you're seeing it along the way. Like you see everybody in our shop at some point. If you follow us enough in my videos and pictures and stuff, you see every employee in the shop. You see the machines running. You see the parts. I mean, you may have seen one of my pictures of you can't see a lot of detail, but of the machines running and the parts being milled. I mean, for all you know, one of those parts that's being milled may end up being on the knife that you bought.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just don't get much of that with mass produced stuff, and especially not with the Chinese mass produced stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
you're
like
not
even
seeing you're not seeing much of inside their factories, and
yeah.
we won't get into why that is, but you can use your imagination.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, even Buck
you
like
just
post stuff sometimes, like of guys polishing blades or handles or doing
yeah
stuff, fitting up stuff, and like so. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
yeah.
off.
No, you're good. But it's kind of too, like, it's just like I mentioned last week. It's kind of like the difference between, you can look through like an IKEA catalog and see a lot of cool looking furniture and stuff in there, but it's not the same thing. It has a completely different look and feel to it than buying something from there or going down to some kind of local craftsman trade show type thing, or some local craftsman in your area that makes handmade furniture or whatever, or even like small batch production furniture. There's shops out there that do that kind of stuff. So like
Yeah.
it's just a different feel to it. You can tell it's not mass produced. You can there I it probably sounds a little hokey, but I really truly almost kind of feel like there's some sort of energy transfer that when you're putting the kind of effort and the kind of stuff into it with a small amount of people like we are,
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like you're transferring some energy into that object, and that goes with it. And yeah, I know that sounds a little crazy, but we're not doing like any kind of voodoo dances over them or anything. At least not usually. Maybe occasionally, but
Yeah.
no,
I know what you mean though. And there's a lot of people
there's
that
something there.
yeah, there's a lot of people that have said the same thing, and like there's something there for that many people to have sort of come to that conclusion. I think I don't
Yeah,
know specifically the right word for it, but it's definitely there's something, a different feeling about something that's handmade or small batch, something more, just there's something different about it.
yeah. And it's, again, same thing like I said with the furniture is a really good example, because
Hmm.
you can, go,
Like
like I
a
said,
table made
I've
by
got
the
to see some
Amish
of the, yeah, exactly where I was about
versus
to go with it.
okay.
Yeah, it's yeah, completely different vibe. Like
Hmm.
and it's not just necessarily like actual, you know, things you can nail down and be like, okay, they use this technique, whereas this use this technique. Yes, it's usually better quality too, but still, it's not necessarily even just a quality issue. It's more just
Yeah.
there's just a different feel to it. Like
Yeah.
it just is. So it reminds me of that old episode of, if you're a Friends fan, that episode of Friends where Rachel and Ross were buying stuff from, I guess, was it IKEA? No, it was, what's the other store like that? Pottery Barn. It was
Mm.
Pottery Barn. And Phoebe, of course, being Phoebe, was totally against mass produced stuff or whatever, and they were trying to trick her and thinking that they had bought their furniture at like a flea market or whatever. It was like a old apothecary table. Anyway,
Gotcha.
and she
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, it's just so cool to
I don't
think
remember
about,
that one.
what this might have been used for back in the day, and
Yeah.
what all the history this is seen or whatever." And that's what I want. One day for our knives, I want somebody's kids, grandkids, great grandkids to be looking at it and thinking about, what all adventures that knife went on, with their granddad and their dad and whoever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or even some random stranger just happens to run across one someday at a flea market or whatever, or at a knife show, and find one that's old like that and be like, man, can you just think of all the possible adventures this knife has been on, all the things it's done? Like,
Yeah.
we do that when we buy older stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's so.
Yeah. I find an
That's
old,
what I want.
like K-bar or something from, or an old, just not necessarily K-bar, but like old military knife, like that bayonet that I showed earlier in the podcast, like just
Yeah.
what that's probably just sat in a warehouse, after the Soviet Union fell and all that and just got sent over here, but
Right.
we don't know. And
Yeah.
so that's the fun part.
Yeah. No telling. Yep. So, yeah. So yeah, that is definitely a pet peeve of mine as well, and that's without getting into the whole, you know, whatever, like not
Geopolitical.
liking stuff
Yeah.
being made elsewhere or whatever. So,
Yep.
but just strictly the genericness of it, because that's really what it boils down to. It's just they just feel very generic.
Yeah.
And I don't say generic in like a poor quality term. I just mean generic.
Yeah.
Not they don't have that special feel to them.
Yeah.
So
All right. I think that's enough on that one, but we ran long on that one last time too, so figured we would do it
yeah,
again.
that's kind of
Yeah.
given.
All right, and Cypress Creek Knives has the next one, and shout out to him. He was sort of the inspiration of this pet peeves thing. He posted on his stories getting some pet peeves out there, and that was sort of the idea for this, and he also contributed to ours. So thank you, sir. He's a very good fixed blade maker, experiments with a lot of cool steels, like old steels like BG42 and stuff like that, and makes really awesome, like just hard using fixed blades that are very nice.
Cool.
So go give him a follow. And he says, when people say out loud 62 HRC, apparently that's wrong. It's either 62 Rockwell or 62 Rockwell C. Just ask Laren. So yeah, this was something that I'm guilty of. I didn't know saying HRC was a bad thing. I thought it meant hardness Rockwell C. I don't know where that, I've just heard other people say it, so I sort of just adopted that, into my vocabulary. So I apologize, but yeah, I'm guilty of that one for sure.
I'm not gonna lie, even though I don't know that I only usually remember saying the number. Like somebody asks, what's your hardness on your knives? It's like 63 to 64 or whatever. I don't usually follow it up. I don't think I probably have been guilty of it at some point, but I'll also say, no offense, but that's a little bit of a nerdy. You know what I'm saying? Like that's getting pretty nitpicky. Like I get it. We're talking about pet peeves, so it is what it is. But
yeah, that's one for the steel nerds out there that are really into the nitty gritty.
Right. I mean, I don't feel like that's offensive considering that, and if it is, oh well. But I mean, his account, Laren's account, is literally knife steel nerds. So I mean, it kind of tracks. So,
for sure. I mean, I don't.
I've ever put any thought into it. Probably won't, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I had no idea that was incorrect in any sense of the word.
Yeah,
so.
that is good. That is good to know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with knowing the very technical stuff. I just don't usually get that bogged down in it.
Yeah, me either. I kind of I get into it, but not try to get that far down into the weeds, I guess. So, but yeah,
as long as my hardness is what it's supposed to be, I don't care if you call it ZBQ whatever. It's 63 to 64. So there you go. As long as the heat treat company gets it right, I'm good.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, sir, for that one. Next one, we got Diesel Matt, our Canadian friend. He says people who handle expensive knives they don't own and treat them like a Kershaw. And we've talked about this one before in terms of like being at shows and stuff, and handling knives at the shows and just sitting there wrist flicking them and whacking them and trying to do all these ridiculous things with knives that they don't own. And even more so, like if you have a friend that hands you a expensive knife and you go to like dig a nail out of a 2x4 with it, there's one thing to be said of ignorance, and there's one thing, it's also, I think, probably worse if they do know that it's expensive and still treat it like that.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the knives, I mean, are expensive. It just kind of depends. Some of the expensive knives look expensive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, it's obvious. You get one, you hand somebody something with mother of pearl and stuff on it, like, you know, mirror polished blade, and they go do something stupid. That's pretty obvious. But
Yeah.
you know, expensive is also relative. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like, you know, an expensive knife could be, you could be talking about a $10,000 knife. You could be talking about a $300 knife.
Yeah.
Depending on who's talking about it. So
Yeah.
but yes, I'm not down with 100% agree that, like, yes, it's regardless, even if it's cheap, like it's not yours, so you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You know,
I
doing
mean, I
that
will
kind of
treat
stuff with it. So
any knife like that I'm handed, and like, you know, it's not mine, so I'm going to treat it better than I treat my own stuff. And you know, I treat my own stuff pretty rough sometimes, but you know, it's mine. I can do that. Like,
yeah.
but yeah,
Right.
especially the knives I make,
But
I'm worse on them than my other
well,
knives
I
because
mean, that's kind of a. I mean, you kind of should be like
yeah,
you. It's really real world testing, honestly. Like just using it without babying it is, you know, I feel like the maker should do that. So,
yeah,
but I will say too that you're right. We should do it with anything, whether you think it's expensive or not. You should
mm,
treat it with respect, because it also, there's also the thing that it might not be expensive. They might hand you what appears to be just a cheap generic old knife,
mm.
but that might have some sentimental value to them. That could
Oh
have
yeah,
been a gift from somebody. It could have been passed down from a relative, you know, anything like that. So I mean, that's, you know, maybe not expensive, but valuable
yeah,
to that person. So there's actually more to it than the actual expense. It could be the value of it means a lot, and it could be a, you know, could be extremely valuable to them while being very inexpensive. So
true,
just a general rule of thumb:
yeah.
treat other people's stuff with respect.
Yeah, and on that
So
note, like there's two knives that I actually keep in my gun safe, and one is the first knife I ever made. The other one is a $13 Kershaw Shuffle that my dad was carrying the day he died. Those are the two most valuable knives I own, bar none. It doesn't matter that it's a $13 Kershaw at all. It's that would
right,
be the knife I would come into the
exactly.
house and save if it was on fire. So
Right, and if
like,
it was, if you carried that, you know, if you chose to carry that,
mm,
then that would be, you know, like I said, I mean, if somebody grabbed that and went to pry a paint can open to snap the tip off of it, that would not be a good scene.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Even though it does look
I
like
got a
he
feeling
tried to
said paint
cut.
can would end up somewhere that they didn't want it.
Yeah, it does look like he tried to cut like a live electrical wire with it at some point. Like there's like gouges out of the
Yeah,
middle
it's
of the
not pretty.
grind. Like
Yeah,
I don't know what he did, but there it's but still, yeah. Anyway, so
yeah,
yeah, I agree
exactly.
with you, Matt. That's
Proving our point.
definitely one of those things
Agreed.
you should respect. You know, not just the expense of it, but you should respect other people's property. You know, in general.
Yep, agreed.
Sorry, guys. All right. So from Fancy Gator Slayer, which I like that name a lot. Uh, he says CNC made customs that are plain gray or all plain gray titanium. And this is not necessarily a pet peeve of mine. You know, some people like what they like and they make what they like. And, you know, whether they're custom or CNC made or whatever, I mean, that's kind of their prerogative. If they've got a formula to make what they make, you know, is what it is. But I do understand that a lot of people out there like variety and color and, you know, a little bit different stuff. So, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's again goes back to something that's just totally subjective. I
Yeah.
mean, because while there are people that feel that same way, there's also tons of people that love a plain Jane, you know, plain Jane full stonewash knives,
Yeah.
which is part of the reason that I'll say this: if there wasn't a market for them, if there weren't people out there that did like them, there wouldn't be so many of them being made. Because as a businessman, I can tell you, like, it doesn't really pay the bills to make a bunch of stuff that people don't buy.
Yeah.
So if, you know, if somebody's making them, there's a reason that they're making them, because they're selling. So if they reach a point where they're not selling as good, they'll find a way to change it up. Promise you.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's kind of, and again, it's just preferences. Also, I guarantee you, I don't know this to be a fact, but I'm fairly confident that black and probably white t-shirts are probably the two most popular colors that are bought. Maybe black and gray, something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
plain colors. I can tell you that from our sales. Like anytime I get the pun intended bright idea to do like a red shirt or a bright blue shirt or something like that, we probably sell 1 to 5 ratio, something like that, of like black or gray.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with cars. I guarantee you the two most common colors are probably still black and white. Maybe some red thrown in there here and there, and probably depending on the genre. But overall, sports cars and stuff, you might see more. But I guarantee you, black and white are probably the two most popular. Could have Googled that before I just throw that out there. But I would be willing to bet that they're probably the two most popular colors. It's just is what it is, But then there's also people that wouldn't drive what they consider a plain colored car to save their life, which is probably the category this, Fancy Gator slay. I mean, he obviously only slays Fancy Gators as well. So that's, there's that. So, I stole your joke from the last episode. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I wanted to get it in there, but
yeah. So anyway, all right. So nothing wrong with that being a pet peeve of yours, but it's definitely it's not something that necessarily bothers me. It's just I think some of that's going back to a little bit of our earlier discussion of just things being so watered down because there's so many people doing that right now. I think that's probably factored into his, his pet peevedness on that one. Just, that there's so many of them out there. So
probably so. And so, I mean, but there's also a ton of other variety out there. So variety is the spice of life. So buy what you like. All right. Next one is from WLRAY 60. And he says off-center blades and folders. And finally getting into one that I think is, not subjective. I think that's sort of just, I mean, not necessarily that it has to be a pet peeve of yours, but I think that's just, one of those things that's, sort of an expectation of a folder is to be centered in the handles when closed.
Pretty much anybody would. Yep. I think pretty much anybody would agree that that's a, correct or incorrect thing. It should be centered. Now, how perfectly centered, ideally perfectly centered.
Yeah.
Like you start getting down to, and like I mentioned last week, I will say this. So I have learned from having to teach other people how to make knives that it can be subjective trying to figure out. Now, truly, like if you can measure it. So if you got, if you had now I had it right off the top, I rattled it off the top of my head last week on the name of the machine. What's it called? The
CMM
measure. Well, a type of CMM machine, but basically
optical comparator.
Optical comparator. Thank you. See, I rattled it off last week, and I can dummy this week. So basically, where you can put it under essentially a microscope and measure like from point to different points on the object. In this case, a knife. Then you could 100% it's not subjective at that point.
Yeah.
But a lot of shops, including ours, do not have one of those. So we're basically depending on, and there's not a good way that you can truly measure that accurately with a set of calipers or something. So you would still get into subjectiveness as far as how you're holding the calipers and being able to hold everything perfectly. That's why those machines exist.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so I learned that because I would keep getting knives on the table, on the inspection table, they would get built and put on the table, and I'd go through and inspect them, and a bunch of them would be off center. I'm like, come on, guys, like you're not, at first I thought people weren't paying attention and just, not centering the blades. Come to find out, it's that they thought they were centered. They just didn't agree with what I thought was centered, and so I basically kind of had to pull rank and be like, all right, I've made a bunch of knives for a bunch of years and never really had an issue with people thinking my knives weren't centered. So, I'm going to just have to go with my judgment on this. And basically they learned to know what I was looking for. So, because they would always be off center to the same side. And so they were putting them where they thought it was centered. And I'd come back and look and be like, oh, it's off. I can't remember which way it was. I think they would always be off to the show side, I think. I can't remember. Anyway,
that is one of the hard things about like on a frame lock, because you have that bend of the lock bar kind of skewing your eye as to what is middle and not middle.
Yep. And you can, depending on how you hold the knife and look at it, it can look, you look at it one way and it can look centered. You look at it another way, it can not look centered, which is why I've tried to, over the years, I've just I look at it like not down the blade. I look at it like straight down at the tip. And look at the point of the handle, the inside edge of the handle on both sides and the very center of the tip, and see if that looks centered between the two. Because anytime I start trying to eyeball down it and stuff, like you said, the curve on that side, everything, it starts to look wonky. So anyway, that's just me, But the guys end up having to learn to. I've got a feeling if you asked them now, if the blades that they're doing, that that are centered, and I feel like the proof that they're right is that we don't get complaints like ever about the blades not being centered when they're new, unless somebody's fooled with them, secondary or something. But like, we never get complaints about an uncentered blade, or almost never, at least. I can't remember the last time we had one. So I feel like what we're doing is correct. But if you ask some of them, they would probably still think that they're technically off center, but they know they're putting them where I want them to put them. So they learn to adjust, like, okay, I think this is centered, but it's got to go a little farther for him to think it's centered.
Yeah.
And now they do it right, But so it can be subjective. I swear, you can take, because we did it. I would take a knife, like when we were trying to hash this out, we would take one.
Yeah.
And, the guy that built it, he obviously thought it was centered. I would look at it and inspect it and be like, no, this is not centered. Show it back to him. Well, it looks centered to me. We'd go grab a couple of other people in the shop. Hey, does this look centered to you? And half the time we'd end up with like a split decision. Like one person would agree with me, the other person would agree with him. And I'm like, well, that's why I said I just have to be the final, the final call here.
Yeah, I mean,
on it. So I'll take the heat if it's not right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so
that's one of the things about being the boss is, the buck stops with you. You kind of have to at some points be like, well, this is the way I want it, or I think it should be. So, but
right. And had we done that and we started getting a bunch of complaints about blades being off centered, then I would have bowed to their eye, and we just started letting their eye being centered, what they were calling centered, be it. But again, I feel like the proof is that we haven't had any issue with that. So anyway, the point is, it while it's not truly subjective, not everybody's eye can see centered as well as you would think.
Yeah.
And I know everybody thinks that they can.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, we all think that we're right. Believe me, that was the same way when we were hashing that out. We all, we never actually got in any like arguments about it, but for sure, everybody thought that they were right. You know what I mean? So it got a little frustrating for everybody. So
I mean, we've had those arguments.
Keep that in mind. For sure. So just keep that in mind that just while you may think, because I even as many knives as I'd made, like when they were questioning on it, when they were pushing back and saying that they thought it was centered, I even had to stop and be like, okay, am I just, I didn't immediately just say, no, that's not centered. Put it, make it centered, whatever. Like I said, we went and got other people in the shop and looked at it and all that. And when it became clear that, there was just some confusion and some subjectivity there, that's when I had to just, like I said, go with, okay, we're going to go with my opinion. So it's just keep that in mind when you're looking at something. I mean, now we're talking about slightly off center.
Yeah.
All right.
Not rubbing scales.
There, almost touching the handle on one side or the other. Yeah. Whole different. I mean, a blind man can tell that's off center. You know what I mean? Like that's, I mean, literally you could feel it.
Yeah.
So it's, we're talking about just slightly off center.
The nitpickiness.
Just keep in mind that, just keep in mind that, yes, it should be centered, but, it's not impossible. You could be wrong. I entertain the thought that I could be after making, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of knives. And then, if I could be humble enough to get other people's opinion on it, then maybe we should all, probably do the same thing.
Yeah. And
I still would, if they came back to me now and like, this is really not looking centered, and we'd look at it again. And so anyway, So yes, 100% should be centered, but also being able to tell that it's centered can be tricky. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. All right. So thank you, Mr. Ray. Next one from M3M Furisk. I don't know. I can't. It's not a pronounceable name. So, but he says blade play for sure is one of his pet peeves. Sorry, I forgot the word there for a minute.
Yep.
And that's
an easy one.
Definitely agree there. Either laterally or up and down, or especially like in the half open position, if you can feel it. Like I've had some knives where you can like feel it kind of loose on the pivot, like in the half open, like it's got some wiggle right there, and like slop in the middle of it, and that creates blade play, in other places after the fact, because of we've had that discussion before where if you've got play, it translates into something else.
Somewhere.
Yeah,
it's going to shift.
Yeah, so definitely agree with that one.
Yeah, 100%. Really not much to say on that one. Yes, it should not have blade play. And I don't feel like that one's super subjective. I think most people can tell if it actually has play or if it's just flexing or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just 100%. It shouldn't have blade play.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, both of those previous reasons, off center and blade play. Like when I finish a knife, I set it down and wait till the next day. Well, especially if it's like late one day when I finish it, I'll set it down and come back the next morning and double check and make sure that I'm not just like tired of fooling with it for that day and, calling it done. Like I'll come back the next day and try to check all those things again. And,
Yeah.
So that's
you can convince yourself that it's good. You know what I mean?
Yes, you
Especially
can.
like you said, if you're tired at the end of the day, you can convince yourself that it's good. And then you come back and look at it later. But then also, they can sometimes creep, especially on when you're building a knife. You know what I mean? Like if you fool with it, you tuned it or whatever, something's a little bit off and you've tuned it, you've gotten it to looking centered or you got to play out it or whatever. And then, it's probably more so the centering than the play. I mean, it's probably not going to creep unless the pivot screw is loosening as you open it and close it or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but 100%, it's a good idea to go back and check because stuff can kind of creep, and even when you add in temperature changes and stuff, if it's goes down real cold at night or whatever, like stuff can move around.
Yeah.
So
I heard somewhere once that like titanium, or it was Fair and Forge used to do a bunch of YouTube videos, and they did a video about like the expansion and contraction of titanium. So 30 degrees up will result in an expansion of 1 thou in titanium, and 30 degrees down will result in like a decrease in 1 thou. So like,
and 1 thou is a lot on some of these. You're talking about detent, centering, blade play, like 1 thou is a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's like, just overall, like, I don't know if that, I don't know exactly what that translates to.
In one direction.
Yeah. They did like
expansion.
They did like a test where they, had a piece of titanium and like they heated it up and it touched a little electrical thing that lit up a light. And then like when it cooled down, the light was no longer lit. So like it was actually, measured in some sense, but
right.
But yeah,
probably measuring just like the height of it, so it probably grew.
Yeah,
which means it probably grew. Overall, probably a 1/2 thou both ways or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it can do weird stuff with temperature.
Yeah.
The temperature in your shop can even affect your CNC machines and stuff.
Really?
As big as they are and stuff. Like, 100%. Yeah, temperature in your shop, which is why you really need a climate controlled shop, because you're not going to keep it exactly the same, but you get big swings in temperature in your shop, it for sure can affect. Yeah, that's a thing for sure.
Yeah.
Dude, this is kind of going down another rabbit hole, but like, even just like, so we were tramming in some stuff the other day. We had a dial indicator on there, and we were working on getting something straight or flat or whatever, and we were setting some stuff up. And this is probably like a no-brainer to like the true machinists and stuff out there, but like, you lean against the machine or like you put your hand on it as you're leaning there to look at the indicator, it'll move it. Like several tenths or more. Like just a machine that size, that heavy, and just you putting your hand on there, kind of leaning your leg against it to lean in there and look, will make the needle move. Yeah, it's crazy.
Dang, I wouldn't. Yeah, so, I know. Like my little mill, I can obviously I can, move the wrong way or push my knee up against the bottom of the table and kind of get it to flex a little bit and move. But I didn't think with something that big it would be
even on the. I think it's just they're just that sensitive. I mean, there's just that much. You're dealing with such small amounts of. Again, I'm saying a tenth. I mean, that's a tenth of a thousandth. A thousandth is approximately the thickness of a human hair.
Yeah.
So,
very, very, very small.
Some minute. Yeah. However, there are some operations that we do that a few tenths make a difference. Anyway. All right.
So
before I go too far down that.
Yeah, definitely agree with those last two, and thank y'all for those. Next one is from Joe Malloy, and he says knife control legislation, i.e., I live in New York, and then anything can be a weapon if you throw it hard enough. And yeah, definitely agree with the whole knife legislation ridiculousness. It's
it's all bullshit.
Yeah, that basically. I mean, anything anything can be a weapon, like
There's
you
no
like
reason
you
you
said.
shouldn't be allowed to carry whatever knife you want to, wherever you want to.
Yeah, there's already laws in
It's
place for if you stab somebody, kill somebody, rob somebody.
right.
There's laws against that. It's
They already
already
have law.
illegal. So yeah, trying to restrict the object is ridiculous.
Yep. It's yeah. And you're seeing that now. I actually just saw Amy just read off to me a headline. It was, I think it was in the UK somewhere over there, where they were about to ban samurai swords or something, which I don't know how they weren't. I'm surprised they weren't already banned over there.
Yeah, I
But
am too.
they had they've had firearms bans for a long time, and then guess what? People quit shooting each other and they start stabbing each other.
Yeah.
So now they're restricting blades more and more. And guess what they're going to do when they do that? They'll start hitting each other with bricks and stuff. Like, if people are going to do harm to other people, they're going to find a way to do it.
Yeah.
But we talked about, when we lost, how a lot of the knife laws that are on the books now are either on the books but from way back. They're super outdated. They're from way back when people were literally having Bowie fights on sandbars and stuff. Which, again, though, why restrict the knife? But still, it's stuff that's left over from way back then, or it's just sheer just idiots making the laws, literally, that are being influenced by movies and stuff. We talked about how, like, back when
West Side
Grease,
Story
was it Grease?
or
West
what?
Side Story came out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
The West Side Story came out.
West Side Story
Switchblades
came
were,
out in 1957. Later that year, an article was written called "The Toys That Kill," and in 1958 there was a federal switchblade ban. And those things are correlated, I promise you. And
100%.
I need to go back and find the article or whatever I read where one of the representatives was on the on in Congress against these toys that kill, these dangerous switchblades, and it is the most ridiculous speech I've ever heard in my life. It's laughable to read it back, but it's just fear mongering. And yeah, so I need to go back and find that and try to share that with you guys because it's honestly hilarious. And that article, "The Toys That Kill."
Yeah, it's no different than now the representatives up there with talking about ghost guns that fire 30,000 rounds a minute and literally make people explode and all this kind of stuff.
It's literally
total
like that.
theatrics. It's total theatrics. It's totally they find something like that makes it sound good or whatever to people that are ignorant of the subject and don't know what they're talking about, and so it gets some. Oh yay, we're doing something. They remind me of that Simpsons, the Ralph meme from the Simpsons of "Look at me, I'm helping."
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what they are. They're a bunch of Ralphs. I'm helping. Freaking idiots.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. So yeah, they're 100%. It's a pet peeve, and it would really be a pet peeve if I lived somewhere like that. So
yeah,
I can totally understand. It's all ridiculous. So
yeah, sorry Joe for your unfortunate conditions there. It's like we said, it's ridiculous, but yeah, it's unfortunate part of society today that just dumb things like that are allowed to go on.
If you try to when it's time to vote, get all your friends and vote accordingly, because that's the only way stuff changes.
Yeah, and try to support groups like Knife Rights and American Knife and Tool Institute, and those groups that sort of lobby for us. Lobbyists are generally not one of the things I typically support, but when done correctly and done in some ways, it's can be a good thing.
Well, they're not just lobbying; they're not just trying to influence lawmakers. They're literally like doing
fighting
lawsuits and stuff, and like trying to get laws changed and stuff. Yeah, I feel like that's more of what they do than tradition. What I consider lobbying. Like just taking schmoozing with the people and trying to.
Yeah, they're not just throwing a bunch of money at senators.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway. So yeah, sorry about that, Joe, but we commiserate. Next one is from Inhale Tide Pods, and also I believe Nick Ramen is his Instagram name. Mentioned this one as well. It's DM for Price, and this is something that I don't see as much as I used to, but especially on like the secondary market for people selling stuff on Instagram or Facebook or wherever people sell knives. Like not putting the price in the post. And it, I agree with Pods here is like, what are you hiding? Why aren't you putting the price in the post if, you're making a sell post? It's kind of silly not to. So,
right. In my mind, the only reason that people do that is because, well, I don't know if it's for in that, but like because they somehow think they're like a salesman or something. If they can get to the point where they're communicating with you,
yeah.
then they can sell you on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's we talked about before how I hate it's very bad with like machinery companies. Like when I go look at machines and stuff, Haas is actually really good about it. Like you can price stuff out on the Haas website, and
Yeah.
they're one of, if not the only one. Like you go look at almost any kind of machinery, and it's like contact us for a quote. I'm like, I don't want to contact you for a quote.
No.
I want to know if this is a machine I can afford like tomorrow or in a year, 6 years. Like I want to
Yeah.
know
I need a
I can make
ballpark.
plans and figure out right. And there's been times when I was 100%, ready to spend money on a machine or whatever, and then still got to jump through all those hoops just so they can get a salesperson to talk to you. And like, dude, you're, it's frustrating. But
Yeah.
and I also equate it to, I hate seeing, it's kind of the same, but not really. But like it shows, I hate it when makers don't put their prices on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always tried to do that. It's just I don't really get that either. Like you're there to sell the knife. Like you
Yeah.
have a price for it. I mean, unless you're planning on haggling, which most of the makers don't like.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand why you wouldn't put your price on there. I mean, I get that there's people that walk through there that are unfamiliar with prices of certain levels of knives and stuff, and they're gonna like act shocked and get big eyed and make comments occasionally. But like still, like you made the thing, you priced it like
Mm-hmm.
take pride in it, stand behind your work and your pricing, and go with it. Like
Yep.
because you also may have people that are walking by that might be interested. They may have they might have 10, 20 grand in their pocket and look at that and be like, oh, that's actually a pretty good deal. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like there's all kinds of people walking around at shows. So it's just it's just always bugged me to have to ask for a price, and it's not just at knife shows; it's anywhere. I don't like having to ask for a price, and I think most people are the same way. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I'm in a, store and there's not like a price tag on it, I'm not going to like, unless I absolutely need it, like if it's bread or milk or
right,
something, like I'm not going
right,
to walk up
right.
to the front and be like,
Something you're
hey, how much is
yeah,
this? Like, so
right. If it's something you've got to have, or you're just super interested in it enough to where you're I don't know. I feel like it's either in most cases, like I said, for machinery, in most cases it's a tactic so that they can try to get you talking to a salesperson and actually sell you.
yeah.
At shows, I think it's probably maybe some people are doing it for that same reason, just to drive engagement and try to get people to actually talk to them, or it's that they're essentially kind of embarrassed of their price or whatever, and they don't want to deal with the uneducated people that don't understand why it costs what it does, which
Yeah.
I
I
get
can
that
see
too.
that. And for me also, like, I mean, I've always displayed my prices, but I've never been happy with any way I've displayed my prices either.
That's
They
me
always
too.
kind of look messy and, little.
Yeah,
I've never really cared for it, having to do the little tags hanging off of them. I know, like, but that works. And so there's one of
that's
those
what makes it
compromise
work.
things where, like, you got to have it. Let's try to do it in
Right.
the best way, possible. And so
Yep.
it's one of those weird
Yep.
things.
Yeah,
So,
because we tried multiple. I've tried doing different stuff from like engraved dog tags to the engraved metal plates and everything else with the price on it. To look nice and try to look kind of classy and fit with everything on the table,
yeah.
and have it laying there in front of the knives or whatever. But then inevitably, people still pick it up and they're sitting there looking at it. Well, how much is this?
Hmm.
You don't want to like make them feel dumb or whatever and be like, well, you just tell them. It just probably half the time people end up still asking you anyway. So I find it's better to just, if there's a price tag dangling off of it, it's hard to miss.
Yeah.
No, I don't love it either. And it makes setting up and all that a whole lot more work when you're doing the
Yeah.
kind of volume we're doing on the table at this point. So it's like,
Those little fiddly
but
tags kind
still,
of suck anyway, just trying to fight with them and having to write on each one of them and all that. But yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
is like a
Well,
necessary.
we end up with a bunch of them get cut off because
Mm,
we put them like under the clip and they're dangling down there around the butt of the knife,
yeah.
and then people will close and one of the little strings will be over there, and it just guillotines them off of there. It's like it happens all the time. But at the same time, it's kind of like a nice little marketing thing. Like, yeah, they're sharp.
Yeah.
You cut the tag off without even realizing it. So
Yeah.
it'll cut.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah,
I agree with that pet peeve.
Agree. All right. So another one from Cypress Creek Knives, and again in the knife steel nerdery, he says prioritizing with high hardness instead of properly balancing steel properties. Sorry. Yeah. So prioritizing high hardness instead of properly balancing steel whenever looking at heat treats. And this is one I don't necessarily full on into the knife steel, into the nitty gritty weeds like we were talking about earlier. But yeah, that is one thing that kind of bothers me as well, is people just look at, they just want to know how hard it is. They don't care, any sort of balance as far as the properties of that steel. They just want it to be as hard as possible. And that's a mistake in my mind.
It is in a lot of cases, for sure. It's I think the people that are purely focused just on that, just like we said earlier, with everything about making a knife, there's balance and there's trade offs.
Yep.
So, and with steel, a million times over, yes, there's always balance and trade offs. So yeah, you for sure can't get too hung up on. I mean, if you're so focused on hitting that one thing, then you're going to have trade offs and lose other stuff. So it's just a trade off. Now, the only area I could say, which I don't think is really what he's talking about, but we've already mentioned Larry and Thomas. Like now he's kind of like he has stuff out there about different steels that which he feels like is kind of the ideal recipe for him. And he doesn't necessarily say like this is the ideal recipe, but it's like it still kind of is like, and people kind of take that as gospel. Then they're kind of going with whatever hardness that he set out in his recipe. Like that's what they're going for. So they want to know, is that steel hardened to that hardness? Like, and I mean, I get that. And I don't, that's not that's fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if you got an expert telling you, hey, this is the best trade-off of all the things this is where I landed on it. This is the trade-off on all the, the balance of the things is this steel hardened to this hardness? Then yeah, but it's people just strictly that going off of, the harder the better is not a true statement in this case.
Yeah.
So that's
indeed.
I think it's what he's trying to get at. Yeah, it's not just an across the board harder is better kind of thing.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Mr. Cypress Creek. Let's see. Next one is from 6.tunze, and that's the guy we met at in Texas that flew in from Colorado for the 1 day ticket. Yeah.
What's up, man?
Yeah. But so shout out Chris.
That's awesome.
He says missing a drop for a knife you really want, and yeah, that's. You want to go?
No, I just saying it sucks. I can go. I got stuff to say, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just it's that can be definitely a bummer if you get all hyped up and excited for it, and then it's you get all excited and it's over in 2 minutes, and there's parallels that could be made jokes of, but I won't do that here.
That into the back one about the last one about the hardness, and we're really getting into the past the PG.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely agree with you, Chris. It can suck, but one thing I want to just let everybody know to keep in mind, it's not personal. We're not doing this against you. We're just trying to put products out there.
Nobody's sitting there and crossing your name out and like as you're trying to check out, sitting there with a button like blocking you.
I need a button. I need a red button.
Yeah, see a name come through and be like, nope, rejected. No,
I mean,
that's not what happens.
Yeah,
we couldn't do that if we wanted to. We wouldn't be fast enough.
No way. But
so,
yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
It just, I mean, not getting something you want, especially something you really want, it's been hyped up for sure. It sucks, and it happens in other industries too. I mean, there's the guys that collect shoes and stuff. It happens to them. I mean, anything that's collectible, you're going to run into that. And that is the thing I want to remind you guys of, is that it doesn't really take the sting out of it. I mean, if you miss something that you really want, it just hurts. Like that's just the way it is. But keep in mind that if you got every single thing you wanted, this whole thing would start to be not fun anymore too. Like the reason that stuff goes so fast like that is because it's desirable and because there's not enough of them to go around.
Yep.
If they were being mass produced in an amount that everybody could get one, then probably 75% of the people wouldn't even want it anymore.
Yep.
Like, the reason that it's so desirable is because there's not enough of it to go around. That's one of the main reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, it's that way with everything. Like I said, in every industry, from knives to shoes to baseball cards to cars, like everything. I mean, if the harder it is to get, the more desirable it's going to become.
Yeah.
So that's just, and then that the more desirable it is, the more competition there is.
Yep.
So it's it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So we bring it on ourselves by that whole human nature of wanting stuff that's hard to get, that's rare, but then everybody else feels the same way, and so then we're all trying to get the same thing, and not everybody can get it. So It's just a cycle. It's human nature. It's a lot of what drives our industry and a whole lot of other industries. It's just, it is what it is. It comes with the nature of the beast. So it stings, but after the initial, after you've gotten mad and thrown your mouse at the wall or whatever you might have done, just calm down a minute and realize that okay, well, it's the same thing. I think I equated it when we talked about it last time with like hunting. Like, I
was going to bring that up.
But if I went out and killed a deer or a turkey, killed a monster deer or a giant turkey every time I went hunting, then like I'd probably get tired of it fairly soon because it wouldn't be challenging anymore. Same way people play video games and stuff. Like, if you literally got on there and just dominated and won every single time you played to the point that it wasn't challenging, would you even still keep playing that game?
Yeah.
More than likely not. You'd probably just move on to a different game until it was not challenging.
Yeah.
Which is what most people tend to do. Right?
Yeah.
It's human
It's
nature.
a cycle.
So so it's just, we want it. It frustrates us. And just like if I'm playing a game and I don't win, I'm pissed. Like, I expect to win. I want to win. But if I won every single time, it wouldn't take long. At first, it would probably feel pretty good. But after a while, it would just be like, this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's not challenging anymore. Humans are made to take on challenges. Humans are made to solve problems. Like, that's the way we're wired. That's what we're supposed to do. So it's, and that's, it bites us in the moment, but just keep in mind it's part of the game.
Yeah.
So
we commiserate, Chris, but also don't yell at us when it happens. It's, we're not trying to do it. No, I don't think you would do that, Chris. You seem like a good dude. But anyway.
No, definitely don't.
For the other people out there that send hateful emails, I don't, necessarily get those because I don't.
Those people, I've got a video on my YouTube.
Yeah.
You can go watch it.
Yeah. So, all right.
Just in case you wonder, it's called "Don't Be a Bitch."
Yeah, that one. All right. Next one is from Mr. Monarch EDC. He says, lack of choils and poor plunge lines. And the lack of choils portion, I mean, that's sort of subjective in my opinion. I think it is. I mean, it is subjective whether you need one or don't need one. And, some people are ardently against them because of, reasons you brought up last time, like the blade falling off in the cut, having that sort of, basically gap, but also, they serve a function as far as, being able to sharpen the blade all the way back. So there's two sides to that coin, and it's sort of just maker and or manufacturer preference or designer preference at that point.
And user preference too, on what you like to, and how you like to sharpen and that kind of stuff. Like you said, it definitely makes it harder to sharpen it and get a nice, perfectly even sharpening bevel from the heel all the way to the tip.
Mm-hmm.
But without a choil, which is why we choose to do them. And I just like the aesthetics of it. I like the way it looks better.
Yeah.
And then, but at the same time, like, I've experienced it myself many times of using a knife with a choil, and especially it seems like cutting stuff like a sheet of plastic or something, like you're cutting through some, like, and the plastic will get hung up back there at the heel. It'll, like you said, it'll fall off the blade and it'll kind of hang up a little bit there instead of, I mean, it's manageable. I mean, if you're being careful of what you're doing, but it does happen. I mean, so it for sure can happen. So there's an argument to be made, both ways for it. It's just, again, kind of a preference. But the plunges, different story.
Yes.
Like, they should be right.
Yes, they should be even and matching, basically. Now, I believe you brought this up last time. There are a whole lot of different ways people execute plunges. Some people do real big sweeping plunge, that, like Walter Brand, his plunge sort of curves out and goes over and, not really, versus my plunges are usually
a radius rather than a straight line.
Yeah. Like my plunges are generally closer to a 90-ish. I mean, there's a little bit of roundness up the, where the corner of the belt hits, but like it's, that part can be subjective, but also I think in terms of like, I have had knives where the plunge didn't actually plunge correctly down to the choil, and choils being misplaced, I guess, or the plunge not being aggressive enough where basically they plunged down and didn't get to terminal thickness at the plunge, and then so you get like this big thick triangle sort of thing going on back at the before the choil gets there. So it's like, why is there a choil here if we didn't get to terminal thickness
a bigger choil
before the choil gets here? So that I would say is
choil is not a magic bullet. It's not done right.
Yeah. So I mean, like in terms of that,
placed right as far as front to back, and it's got to be big enough to actually so that where the heel is actually, like you said, terminal thickness, and you don't have that, because if not, you're still going to get that little kick up when you sharpen it. If it's still getting fatter as it comes down the heel right there, you're still going to get that little kick up in your sharpening bevel. So, and also, like you said, you're talking about the differences in plunges. Like you're kind of talking about the top corner up there being sweeping or what, but there's also differences in the entire plunge where some people's is almost like a straight, almost like a 90-degree, very straight, crisp wall. And then a lot of them are more like kind of rounded over and radiused over the top of the plunge, which again, neither one is wrong as long as they're clean and symmetrical. That's the biggest thing, is that, you don't have gouges and weird stuff in there. If they're clean and symmetrical, whether they're straight or whether they're, rounded or whatever, to me, there's no right or wrong. It's just as long as it's clean and symmetrical. And like you said, the, choil plunge, connection there has to be right, or else it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having it in the first place. So
that's one of the big things that's one of my other pet peeves as far as like production knives. I see them out there where like they'll put the choil behind the plunge line, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, there's no point here.
It's because it's basically for looks.
Yeah.
It's not for function.
It's like they'll put it in all sorts of places where it doesn't make sense. So yeah, definitely agree with you there, Jerome. Let's see. Hang on, let me see how many more we got here. We've actually burned through more than we did last time.
Okay, we're probably getting close to a stopping point on them to save some for another episode.
Yeah, we can do that. All right. Do you want to hit there were a few questions I wanted to hit this week before we ran away. A couple email questions that we got.
All right.
Sorry.
And speaking of that, guys, please continue to send in questions to the emails. It really helps us to have content to talk about and stuff. And go ahead, and now would be a good time. Go ahead and tell them the email address before we forget.
Yes. The email is knifefreakshow@gmail.com, and that only has one S. So knifefreakshow@gmail.com.
There you go.
So, yep. All right. First question is from WLRAY, who had a pet peeve earlier. He said a whole bunch of suggestions and stuff that basically boiled down into any plans for shirts or other merch for the podcast going forward. And basically our plan for that is that we will eventually have them, but not quite yet. We want to try to kind of build up a little bit more and, kind of establish a larger viewer base before we go jumping into a whole bunch of different merch and stuff. He mentioned a bunch of stuff like coffee cups and, hoodies and beanies and all sorts of stuff like that. Not sure if we'll dive full into that, right off the bat, but at some point we'll definitely do some shirts.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe not, well, you and I will talk about it, but maybe not too much longer, because as you were saying that, I know that's kind of, we had talked about that, we want to wait till there's enough of a market for them that we're not going to sell like 2 shirts, but at the same time, having people out there wearing the shirts would actually help promote the show. So
that is a good point. You didn't bring that up last time.
Yeah, well, I just thought about it when you were saying that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the but we do. I mean, we do our shirts in house, and Chase and I either one have access to just to do the shirts or whatever. So, but that being said, we do when you order the transfers to do the shirts. It is, I mean, it's way more cost efficient to order them in decent numbers. So,
Yes.
I don't want to commit to a whole bunch of those, and then, like I said, end up selling like 3 shirts. So, um, so you guys let us know, kind of what you would like to see. That would help a lot too. Without us just coming up with something totally. We've got to come up with a graphic that we're happy with first and foremost, and then kind of let us know like what you'd like to see as far as whether you'd like to see what kind of graphic you'd like to see, ideas for graphic, front or back, whether or not it, you know, what color shirts, because
Yeah.
all that stuff factors in. We have that's all decisions that we have to make. So, and
Yeah.
it's always actually, believe it or not, hard decisions because it's like I said, I already mentioned earlier about the colors and stuff. Like I'll get a bright idea that we're going to do some kind of wilder looking shirt, and then like that they don't sell, and then we just keep selling black ones or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Like you're like,
you know,
well, I don't want to do another black knife shirt. Like everybody has those, but
yeah.
there's also a reason everybody has
So I'll
those.
do
Everybody
bright
likes
blue,
those,
and then yeah,
but
and then
like,
we sell like 3.
yeah.
So
So
guys got to be manly enough to wear bright blue shirts. Come on now.
I don't think I'll be getting a bright blue one. I'm more of a gray guy myself or a black guy myself.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not a black
yeah.
guy, but anyway.
But all kidding aside, guys, if you'll give us some suggestions, you can send them in just like you're doing the questions and stuff. We would actually love to hear
Yes.
some ideas as far as like what because I don't really think we probably want to use the graphic that we could, but the graphic that we use like on the for the show or whatever. I was trying to look and see if it was showing somewhere on my screen.
Yeah. No.
Anyway, like this one that shows up on the graphics for the show or whatever, but and ones we did the stickers at Blade. But we could do that. But if you guys have ideas for something else, that's been ever since I came up with the whole knife freak thing. I've never been able to get happy with a graphic for it. I've had graphic done for it. I've never been truly happy with it. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some ideas, and we can maybe on graphics, placement, colors, all that good stuff. Let
Yep.
us know.
Yep. Definitely. All right. So thank you, Mr. Ray. That was a great suggestion and great question. So
Yep.
next one from Andy, and I believe it was Andy McClam, if my memory
Yep.
serves. But yeah.
Yep. He's part of Team McNeese. He's
Gotcha.
part of Team Knife Show Freak too. But
All right.
yep.
All right. So Andy had a couple questions, but we don't have time for all of them today. But the first one he said is, if you weren't making knives for a living, what would you be doing instead? And I'll let you hit that one first since I got the shirts first.
All right. So probably if any of you are familiar with that Luke Combs song, I think it's named if I weren't doing this, like basically the gist of the song is if I wasn't doing this, like at the level that he was doing it at, that he would still be doing it. Like if he wasn't a country superstar, he would still be playing in bars and making music. So yeah, that's probably, I would be probably still working a job and making knives, So I would probably revert back to what I was doing before, which was I was a licensed physical therapy assistant. And so that's what I was doing when I started making knives. Maybe he would have moved into sales by this point, but because I would have a little more knowledge because my wife Amy was a registered nurse and she moved into sales during the time while I was moving into knife making. So that opened my eyes up to those possibilities. So realistically, I'd probably either still be doing therapy or in some sort of sales, probably medical sales, and still making knives on the side. So that's my best guess.
Yeah, sort of. I think I would still be trying to figure out how to do this in some capacity as well. I think, that's just kind of the way we are. But if I wasn't doing this for a living, it's kind of hard to say because I didn't really I had jobs, but I didn't have a career before I started this. I was, 25, I think, when I started working with you or so. And
you got started young enough in this that,
but I've got a degree that I don't think I would necessarily use in terms of like going to that field professionally. So I don't know. I'd probably revert back to my plan coming out of high school where I wanted to be a high school teacher and coach football. So probably do something with that. Or I might be, looking at like machining jobs or manufacturing jobs to kind of, further my education into that sector as well. Cause there's a lot of like factories and plants around here that will like sort of help you pay through with college and stuff like that and get your machining certification as you work with them and stuff like that. So, might be doing something like that. because I know very little about machining. So I would like to know more about that anyway. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that probably. Yeah, and those are best guesses because the
Yeah.
fates aligned or whatever. I don't know if it's fates or just sheer willpower for both of us that like this was once I discovered it, like there was no turning back. So
Yeah, like my initial thing was I was going to do like the teaching thing and have like a 10-year plan where I was going to, with the off time that teachers have, I was going to try to
right.
kind of build up a knife business. And, I just kind of jumped the gun and skipped the whole other part because I'm stubborn. So, yeah.
Well, there can be some advantages of that. As long as if you make it work, then you got a leg up on time and stuff.
Yeah.
So not starting anywhere near as late as I did.
Yeah. Which, do you know how old you were
Cool.
when you first started making knives? Random question.
If I did the math from 2008, I'm 51 right now, so
I can't
I
math.
had a birthday yet this year. So yeah, I'm not mathing that. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So y'all do the math and y'all can figure it out. We will never know the answer.
Yeah. From 23 to 2008.
Yeah.
51 in 2023. So no, 24. Sorry. See, I can't even say the years right.
It's 2025, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying. Right now I haven't had my birthday yet this year.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I'm still 51. Turned 51 in 24.
Yeah.
And I started making knives in 2008.
Yeah.
And in this amount of time, we could have used a calculator and figured it out.
But probably. But yeah, that's overrated.
Participation.
Yeah. All right. So with that, you got anything fun going on in the shop right now?
Yeah. I'm just going to briefly touch on it because we're starting to run a little long. I'll go into it in depth a little more. I've been kind of hinting about it, but we are in the process of we've started grinding some blades in the shop on one of our CNC machines. We're using a method that I think, to my knowledge, Chris Reeves was the first one that I know of that started. I think that's the way he's made his knives basically ever since he started making them, from what I understand. So 35 years ago or however long they've been in business. So it's not new, but there are several other people that are currently doing the same method or versions of that method too. So we decided that we were kind of tired of none of the other methods we were using were really panning out the way we needed to. Lead times and stuff are killing us. That is also the exciting thing about it. Is two exciting things about it. Gives us more control, which means we should be able to produce a little faster. So we won't be dealing with lead times and lags and stuff as much. It's allowing us to go back to doing a hollow grind, and it actually changes back to the plunges. It's actually going to change the way the grinds look and stuff too. They actually are going to have a little more of one of those swooping grinds like you were mentioning earlier and stuff. So I should be showing those the first. We're doing it first since we're just coming out with the Dixon model. We're just kind of starting with those to do this new grind on. So we've got some assembled. I hadn't figured out how I want to put my logo on them because the way the shape of the hole and all that, like I'm trying to figure out. I think I've got it figured out, but we haven't actually proofed it out yet. We're going to do that tomorrow.
Gotcha.
If all goes well, maybe by tomorrow evening, we'll have a finished knife I can get a picture of and show you guys what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's coming up. So that's super exciting, but I'm also still tweaking. We're literally doing the blades like one at a time now. Like we haven't actually run a whole pallet yet. So still some tweaking and proofing out to do, but we can grind the blades. And I will say this up front too. The way they look right now, this first picture I show is subject to change somewhat because we're still experimenting with different wheels to figure out which ones are going to give us the best results, to include longevity and like how fast the wheels wear out. So depending on which wheels and what size wheels and all that we end up with, it could change a little bit. Like the height of the grind could change slightly. They shouldn't anything change too majorly, but just know that they could change a little bit. So anyway, super exciting, but I'll go into way more depth on that later after we've actually got it kind of nailed down a little more. So
sweet.
What about you?
Yeah, excited to see that. I'm all over the place. I don't know. I'm working on Blade Show knives. I'm working on a few order knives. Working on some stuff for River's Edge Cutlery. Did some heat treating this week. Cool. Last week on the episode, that we lost, I mentioned that my power went out for like half of a day. So I had nothing else to do besides put that old surface grinder back together. So it's finally reassembled. I still need to get a VFD and get it wired and get it in place and all that, but it's at least back together. The one that I got from you. So that's good. But
awesome.
Otherwise, I'm just kind of doing little stuff here and there. I'm kind of moving all the Blade Show folders along, together, drilling and reaming holes and surface grinding and, all that sort of monotonous stuff that, takes a while to get 10, 12 blades, moving through. But, it's all just kind of part of the process. Yeah.
Yep.
And got a few collabs for Blade Show, by the way. Yeah. So just going to drop that hint here and I'll talk about those a little later. Yeah.
Cool. I'm excited to hear about that.
Well, you know about one, but.
Dude, you just talked about how old I am. I've already forgotten.
I'll remind you at a later date when I'm ready to talk about it. Then. How about that? All right. So speaking of which, all right, we've already hit the email, but I'm going to hit it one more time. It's knifefreakshow@gmail.com with 1 S. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let us know if you want some t-shirts and if you'd be interested in stuff like that and what you would want to see on a Knife Freak Show t-shirt. You want to mention our Blade Show locations? Go ahead and keep mentioning that, or
yeah, if I knew my Blade Show location.
I got you. He will be at
off the top of my head.
What?
I don't know. I don't remember them off the top of my head. Told you. See, I'm all out of sorts.
You got a lot of other stuff going on. You're good. All right. He will be at McNeese Knives will be at booth 424 and 426. They will be over on the left side of the room facing Microtech, I believe is what you said.
Yep. Yeah. So we moved locations this year, guys. We're not going to be in the we're not that far away, but we moved into a double booth and we're going to be directly across the aisle facing Microtech. So if you can find Microtech, you should be able to find us. Just come to us first.
Yep. All right. And I will be at table 15B. So basically sort of right on the end of the tables, close to the booths and all that, is where I'll be. So,
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to another week. You got any closing thoughts?
Just we do appreciate you guys, and we will. You got my mind working on the merch and stuff now because like we need to do some giveaways and stuff too. We've been doing this long enough that we need to start doing some stuff, especially as like rewards for some of these comments and questions and stuff, the viewer participation stuff. So and somebody can tell me how long I've been. What age I was when I started making knives, maybe stuff like that, send them a prize. So anyway, So we appreciate you guys a whole lot. That's what's making this worth doing, and we appreciate you. Please help continue to spread the word. And we when we post, you guys, I've had a lot of people recently. They've gotten really good about reposting our stuff, like our company stuff in general, which I greatly appreciate. And you guys, a lot of you are doing it for the show as well. I really appreciate that because y'all know how Instagram treats us. So any help we can get on spreading our stuff and getting it out there more is greatly appreciated. Please keep that up.
Yeah. All right. And don't forget to let your freak flag fly.